Hey everyone, welcome to the Backpack Composer. For those of you who are new, I'm Will. For those of you who are not new, I'm still Will. Today's video is about drums, more specifically how to get realistic sounding drums when you're working entirely on the iPad. I'm going to say two things up front. One, I am fairly certain I have the flu, hence the lateness in posting this. And two, a realistic drum will make or break your mix. Some styles of music call for a very electronic or synthesized drum, and that's fine, but since this channel is not about beat making, I don't do much with electronic drums. For my music anyway, what I want is a drum kit that sounds like a real player. The only difference between producing on an iPad and a MacBook, as we've said, is the plugins, and on the MacBook, a good session drummer can run you between $50 and $300. But there is a way to do this for $20 on the iPad. There might even be a way to do it for free, and I'll go into that later. So in this video, we're going to walk through three parts: how to use the session drummer, and which games you can play with the MIDI mapping and external instruments. We're going to build a legacy style multi-channel kit in Logic Pro. Logic Pro for MacBook comes with them. Logic Pro for iPad does not, but I'm going to show you how you can build your own. And then how to set up your effects change for individual drum channels and proper drum bus and sub-aux sends for the good stuff. And at the end, I'll show you how all of these concepts apply to synths, keys, effects pedals. Let's get into it. We're going to start with Logic Pro's Session Player. The Thing is one of the best tools for creating drum performances that feel human, even if you're not a drummer. Now, the first thing I do is map my MIDI triggers. By hitting the little keyboard button at the bottom right, that's how we can control what every individual key sounds like. So that's our mapping. To the left, next to the four squares, is our velocity. Today, I'm not going to get into that because that's a whole discussion on its own, but if you need something louder or quieter based on how hard you hit the pad, that's the setting you want to tweak. So Logic Pro's Session Player has two modes. There's stereo out, which is just a stereo mix of drums, and then there is multi-output. Multi-output gives every individual drum its own channel, but it groups them. So basically, if you pick multi-output, it's going to give you multiple buses. One is just cymbals, one is hi-hat, one is snare, one is kick, one is toms. But on Logic Pro for MacBook, you can take it a step further and give every individual drum, so you'd have three channels for three toms, snare, top, snare, bottom, hi-hat, room, reverb, room, dry, like it goes crazy. And we can still do all of this here, and it's not as hard as people think it is. Once your MIDI map is clean, the session player feels alive. You can adjust complexity, swing, and even drummer style. And if you're driving external sounds, like a hardware drum module or synth sampler, the same setup works either way. This is the bridge between the iPad and your gear. MIDI is just the language. So once the mapping is done, you can save the setting and everything will work the same way going forward. This just sets the foundation for everything else we're going to discuss today. If you don't know how this works, the rest of this is going to be super confusing. So now with our session player ready to go, I wanted to show you what I did with mine, and then I'll show you how I did it. So this is a studio kit that I put together myself. And there are 30 some odd tracks. And you'll see as I'm scrolling that every single track has a different sound, and each sound is mapped to a specific key. So it's not like I have to memorize where all of them are. You just set it once and save it and you're done. So here are what they look like mapped out. So it's just a bunch of samples that I assigned to pads, and as I play them, all of the samples assigned to each pad sound off at the same time, which is basically what the session player was doing, but now I have multiplied the number of samples playing at the same time. You'll see that it is not taxing on the processor at all, so this is very simple to do, and the iPad can support it no problem. You'll also see that I can add my effects in so that every time I open this self-built preset, it loads the effects and the sends as well. So basically I have taken what was the session player, and it is still the session player, but it is doing so much more. I have 7 kick drums, I have 8 snare drums, and of those 8, it's split into 4 groups, so hard hits and soft hits. I have my hi-hats, I have ride cymbal, ride bell, crash left, crash right. I have 8 toms, so 4 top mics and 4 bottom mics, and all of them are panned. And then since all of it is technically playing through one bus mix, that mix itself is where I put my reverbs for like the room simulator or any sort of chroma glow distortion. So where did all the sounds come from? Splice is $20 a month. And once you download samples, they are yours and they are licensed for you to use commercially, which means you don't have to pay $20 every month. You can pay the $20 once, download what you need, and then never pay it again. So I went into Splice and filtered to drum sets, and they have some that come pre-packaged as every sample you would need. Or what I did was I actually just mixed and matched what I needed until I found a whole bunch of sounds I liked, and then I layered them together. After you download your Splice samples, it actually saves them to a proprietary folder on your iPad, so you don't have to go looking for them, and that actually makes this next step extremely easy. I can't actually take credit for having discovered this. I actually found it in another Logic Pro for iPad YouTube video, but doing it this way is different than the video I saw, because when he did it, he had to have 2 windows open, and by Splice saving it to its own folder, you can actually get to your samples within Logic's sample finder. So the first thing you want to do is find your samples that you just saved from Splice, and all you have to do is drag them and drop them onto the track line. As soon as you do this, it's going to ask you if you want to play the sample as part of the quick sampler or as the drum machine designer. Do the drum machine designer knowing that it's going to ultimately end up going through the quick sampler. All of this is technically optional. I just do it so I can keep track of what's what once I have multiple tracks going. But Logic will let you decide on color, a symbol, icon, whatever, just to make your workflow easier. When using the drum designer, you'll notice that the pads are pre-labeled. you can actually ignore those and you can reconfigure them to do whatever you need to do. This will also let you tune your drums. So going back to our MIDI mapping discussion, this is where I assign a sample per MIDI trigger, i.e. the input note, and then the output note is what I will use to shift the pitch of the drum, cymbal, whatever, up or down, much like you would in a professional studio setting. So if you want your toms to be super boomy, you can tune them down. If you want your snare to be super sharp, you can tune it up. And what I will do is, as I'm dropping multiple samples in, every sample will have a slightly different setting so that when they play back, there's more color. I have the session player still pulled up just for comparison reasons. You see that the session player only gives me 5 tracks total, but you'll see that once I start dragging and dropping all of my samples in, the possibilities are endless. All the same purpose, but more to work with. As I said before, you can ignore the template that the drum machine designer gives you, because as I'm dropping things onto pads, I can change the pad without it moving where it is on the template. But if you've never done it before and you don't know what the appropriate notes are for your MIDI mapping, this is a good place to start. Alternatively, you could just drag them all onto different pads, and in the little menu that comes up when you double click them, there's a button that says listen for note, and then you can assign it using your external gear. Just for demonstration purposes today, I'm keeping this relatively simple, 1 drum per pad, but on the pad set that I use when I'm recording and doing my mixing and mastering, as I showed you before, every individual pad has 3 or 4 samples assigned to it. So now that our drums are put together, we can open our session player back up just to get ourselves a pattern to test it out with. That doesn't sound half bad. It doesn't sound real, but it doesn't sound bad. So now we're going to build it out some more and add some more samples. Now, I mentioned that there might be a way to do this for free, and that way entails assigning pre-existing drum samples, so the samples that come with the session player, to your new Q player setup. So basically, if we don't want to download new samples, we can just rearrange the samples that are in there to make our own kit. We can already hear the difference in color and clarity by doubling up on some of those pads and putting some reverb in there. Also, you'll notice that my original session player had 5 tracks. This one, it looks like we're creeping up on 30. So it can be done. Next step is to start your compression, expansion, reverb, all the stuff you need that would happen in the professional setting with a drummer. We've established that Splice is your friend here. All the samples are licensed and commercially available for use. And you can download individual samples or full kits. Now we want to get into your effects loops. Every drum channel gets its own effects chain. So we have 25 tracks, we will have 25 chains. Think of this like your mic chain in a studio. You could have one on the kick, or you could have three. You can have one on the snare, or you can have two. You can have three on three toms, or you can have 5 on 3 toms. It really all depends on how much control you want over the end product. So once you've got your channels sounding solid, you want to route them all into the drum bus. This Q sampler is going to do that for you. And then what I do is I will add individual sends to the master out for the stuff that I want to cut through. So kick drum, not all 6 of them, but maybe 1 or 2 of them will get sent to the main channel. Same with the snare. I might give a little bit of hi-hat depending on how much I need it to cut through, but normally the hi-hat itself is high-pitched enough. I don't have to worry about it. I'll also send the snare to its own gate for a bigger reverb sound, and I'll send the kick to a sub-channel that's just low end. So I saw on Facebook recently, somebody said that the human ear can't hear below 50 hertz. So why do we mix that low? The answer to this is you can't hear it, but you will feel it. If you have a subwoofer on your home stereo or in your car, the punch comes from 180 hertz and down. So what I will do is my kick drum gets routed to a sub-boost channel that is just that 50 to 90 hertz range. I'll bring it low into the mix so it's not overpowering, but you only know it's there when you're listening on really good speakers. Now, all of that was just to get our instrument to sound the way we want it to consistently. Now that it's done and set up, we can actually use it, and it will be mapped to be used either with the session player, like I showed you before, or with an external instrument like the Strike Pro or the Akai. Considering I do not feel well, I will not be going to the basement this week, but I will demonstrate how this works with the Akai. So once all of your recording is done using your brand new self-made drum set, you want to quantize it. Quantizing takes all of your notes that are off the beat and puts them on the closest beat. You will probably need to do some fine tuning in the editor window to move some things by hand, because if there are notes that overlap, the quantizer is just going to stack them on top of each other. So you'll have to undo that. But once that's done, you can polish it up, and then we just run our regular mixing, mastering, and automating steps. So while that's happening, I mentioned before that these principles can be used on other synths and in other effects chains. I do something very similar when I'm recording strings and brass instruments. I will do the actual MIDI notation and or chords in Logic, and then I will send them via the external instrument option to my Akai that has a preset on it that I think I showed a couple videos ago, where the horns are all on separate MIDI channels and the strings are as well, and I can do a live mix as the song is playing, and it will record it to a stereo track. So it's the same basic idea where the samples exist somewhere outside of Logic, but I'm just telling Logic when to play them. Or I'm using Logic to tell something when to play them. Alright, so everything I just showed you translates directly to any external MIDI setup. Keyboard, synths, even outboard MIDI controlled pedals. It's all the same logic. If you can map it, you can control it. If you can route it, you can record it. The iPad does not limit you, it just makes the whole system lighter, faster, and more portable. So whether you're tracking drums in your living room or composing on the road, just remember, build smart, mix dynamically, and keep your sound alive. Thanks for watching, and if this video helped, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already. Pick up the Mixing and Mastering on iPad book from www.thebackpackcomposer.com. Drop a comment and let me know what kind of setup you're using for drums. May your gear be light, your latency low, and your dogs quiet while you track vocals. See you next week.